At the Christmas party, when I walked into the house, my sister-in-law mocked me. Failed business, and you still came back. My brother-in-law sneered, and my father-in-law said, "Look at your brother-in-law. He just got promoted." Not like you. My name is Gwendolyn Pierce, and at 35, I thought I had figured out how to keep my family together. I'd worked hard in tech for years, quietly built a successful company, and sent money back to Salt Lake City whenever they needed it. House repairs, medical bills, investments in my brother-in-law's startup. I did it all without asking for credit, thinking that's what family does. But that night, as soon as I stepped through the door with gifts in my arms, the air turned cold. The Christmas lights were twinkling. The tree was perfect, but the smiles faded the moment they saw me. My sister-in-law's words cut through the room like a knife, loud enough for everyone to hear. My brother-in-law's smirk followed, and then my father-in-law drove it home, comparing me to the one they all praised. I stood there, the words hitting harder than I expected. I'd spent years making sure they never had to worry about money yet. Here they were throwing it back in my face in front of the whole family. My husband stayed silent, staring at the floor. The room went quiet, forks paused midair, but no one said a thing to defend me. I could have argued, could have reminded them of everything I'd done. Instead, I just smiled, pulled out my phone, and called my secretary. A moment later, my brother-in-law's phone rang. He answered, listened for a few seconds, and his face turned pale. What kind of family turns on you like that after everything you've sacrificed? And what would you do if they made you feel completely worthless right in the middle of Christmas? Stick around, because what I did next changed everything. If you're already shocked, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss how this unfolds. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next. Growing up in Salt Lake City, Utah, money was always tight in the Pierce family. My father-in-law, Robert Pierce, worked as a plumber for years, handling repairs around town. But an old shoulder injury from a bad fall on the job made lifting and heavy work increasingly difficult. It limited his hours and left him turning down bigger projects. My mother-in-law, Diane Pierce, filled the gaps by selling handmade quilts and crafts at local markets and fairs, putting in long hours stitching and setting up booths to bring in extra cash. They got by on what they earned, paying bills on time most months, but any unexpected expense, like a car breakdown or medical visit, threw everything off balance and created real stress for the whole household. I met my husband, Nathan Pierce, during college classes, where we bonded over shared interests in technology and outdoor hikes around the area. We dated steadily and married when I was 24, settling into a small place in Salt Lake City not far from his parents. Right after graduation, I landed a solid job as a software engineer at a local tech company, starting with a decent salary that increased with experience and allowed me to build savings fairly quickly. Nathan had his position at a bank, steady and low stress, which gave us a comfortable routine without too much financial pressure. Coming from a background where my own family had struggled to make ends meet during tough times, I recognized the strain on his parents and wanted to ease it where I could, especially since Dad's injury meant he couldn't push through like he used to. In American families, self-reliance is valued highly, and people pride themselves on handling their own affairs. But when a physical limitation hits a breadwinner, quiet help from adult children becomes more accepted without making a fuss about it. The first significant support came when the roof began leaking seriously during a heavy snow season, threatening water damage inside the house. They couldn't cover the cost themselves, so I transferred $15,000 from my savings to hire contractors for a full replacement, ensuring the problem was fixed properly before winter worsened. Not long after, the old heating system broke down completely, leaving the house chilly in the cold Utah nights, and I sent another $10,000 to install a new, efficient unit that would last for years. Dad expressed his thanks briefly over the phone in his usual reserved way, and Mom followed up with pictures of the completed work, sounding relieved. Around the same period, my brother-in-law, Connor Pierce, shared his early idea for a medical software startup aimed at streamlining patient records for small clinics. He was enthusiastic, drawing up basic plans and talking about potential features that could make a difference in healthcare management. To help him get off the ground, I provided $10,000 as seed funding, enough to develop a working prototype and cover initial software tools, without overcommitting at that stage. Word spread in the local community about his project, with people at networking events and church gatherings commenting on how promising it sounded and praising his initiative. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction seeing those contributions make a tangible difference, from keeping the house livable to giving Connor a real start on his vision. It seemed like the right way to support the family, strengthening our bonds and preventing the kind of hardship I'd experienced growing up. Nathan was aware of the transfers, but never delved into details or questioned them much, simply accepting it as part of how things worked. Mom and Dad leaned on the assistance without fanfare, and Connor dove fully into building his prototype. In my mind, these acts were quietly holding everything together, fulfilling a personal commitment to ensure no one faced unnecessary struggles. By my mid-20s, after a couple of steady years in tech, I started feeling the pull for something more independent. The job in Salt Lake City paid well and offered stability, but the daily commute and office routine began to wear on me, especially as I thought about building a future on my own terms. Park City was only about 35 miles away, close enough for occasional family visits, yet far enough to provide the quiet focus I needed in a town known for its peaceful mountain setting and growing tech community. I decided to take the leap, leaving the corporate position to launch my own startup focused on medical software that helped clinics manage patient data more efficiently and securely. The early days were challenging, with long hours coding from a small rented office and pitching to potential clients who were hesitant about a new player in the field. Success didn't come overnight. It built gradually over the next 4 to 5 years through persistent effort and small wins that added up. The breakthrough arrived when I secured the first major contract with a network of local hospitals in Utah, allowing the software to handle real patient records and streamline appointments in ways that saved time and reduced errors. From there, word spread among healthcare providers, leading to additional partnerships that expanded the user base and brought in steady revenue to hire a small team and improve the platform further. Nathan remained detached from the details of my work, often responding with a simple nod when I mentioned a busy week or a new feature rollout. He seemed to view it as just another engineering role, nothing that required deeper conversation, and never pressed for specifics about the company's growth or finances. That lack of curiosity suited me at the time, as it kept things uncomplicated at home while I poured energy into the business. Meanwhile, I continued supporting Connor's venture in a way that stayed completely under the radar. My lawyer set up an anonymous LLC, a common structure in the U.S. for investors who prefer privacy and asset protection, allowing me to channel funds without my name attached directly. What started as the initial seed contribution grew into larger Series A investments totaling several $100,000 as his medical software gained traction and needed capital for development, marketing, and hiring. This positioned me as the primary investor behind the scenes, providing the backbone for expansion without anyone in the family realizing the full extent. Connor began receiving recognition at local entrepreneur events in Salt Lake City, where organizers invited him to speak on panels about building a tech company from scratch. Attendees praised his vision and determination, gradually shaping an image of him as a self-made success story, driven purely by his own effort and innovation. The narrative took hold in community circles, with people commenting on how he had bootstrapped his way to promising growth. From my distance in Park City, I watched these developments with quiet pride, regularly transferring funds to keep things moving and feeling like I was contributing meaningfully without needing acknowledgement. My best friend Paige Morrison was the only person who knew the complete picture. She had followed my journey from the beginning and offered encouragement during late-night calls when doubts crept in. The arrangement felt sustainable, balancing my own achievements with ongoing family support in a way that avoided complications. This Christmas, I made the drive back to Salt Lake City, hoping for a nice family gathering that might smooth over some of the tension that had built up. The roads were clear enough despite the light snow, and I arrived with a trunk full of carefully chosen gifts, including first-class tickets for a Caribbean cruise, as a special anniversary surprise for Mom and Dad. Something luxurious they had never splurged on themselves. Nathan rode along quietly, commenting only on the weather and traffic, while I looked forward to seeing everyone together under one roof for the holidays. The house felt welcoming at first, with the familiar sights of decorations and the aroma of holiday cooking filling the air as relatives mingled and exchanged seasonal greetings. People seemed glad to see us, initially offering hugs and small talk about recent events, creating a moment where the usual undercurrents stayed hidden beneath the festive mood. We gathered around the table after the main meal to open presents, and I slid the envelope with the cruise tickets across to Mom and Dad, excited to see their reaction to the getaway they deserved after years of hard work and sacrifices. They opened it together, reading the details, but instead of excitement, Dad set it down with a neutral expression and said they didn't need fancy trips paid by someone who couldn't even keep a business running. Mom looked uncomfortable but stayed silent, folding the tickets back into the envelope, as if unsure what to do with them. Brooke seized the moment, speaking up loudly so no one could miss it. "The two useless people are back," she announced with a smirk, then turned directly to me. "Failed business and you still came back." Connor sneered right away, leaning back in his chair with amusement, and Dad followed up without hesitation. "Look at your brother-in-law. He just got promoted, not like you." The words echoed in the sudden quiet landing with deliberate force in front of the entire family. Nathan sat beside me through it all, his expression unchanging as he focused on his drink and avoided looking anywhere near the confrontation. He offered no response, no hand on my arm, no quiet word of support. Just complete stillness that amplified the isolation I felt in that instant. The betrayal sank in deeply, years of quiet contributions dismissed in a single evening, and the unified front against me made clear how far things had shifted. I held back any outburst, drawing a slow breath to steady myself amid the stunned silence from a few relatives who shifted awkwardly but said nothing to intervene. Instead of reacting with anger, I reached for my phone with a calm smile and dialed my secretary, Sarah Jennings, speaking briefly about an urgent matter that needed immediate attention. Within moments, Connor's phone rang from across the table. He answered confidently at first, but as he listened to the COO on the line explaining an emergency board meeting that required his presence right away, his expression changed completely. The color drained from his face, and he gripped the phone tighter, muttering questions that received short, firm replies. The shift in the room was palpable confusion, replacing the earlier smugness as Connor ended the call and stared at his screen. I stood up quietly, gathered my coat, and left, without another word, the door closing softly behind me on the way to a nearby hotel for the night. Once settled in the room, my phone buzzed with a call from Paige, who had seen the latest post from Brooke online and wanted to check on me after hearing about the evening through mutual contacts. That same night, sitting alone in the hotel room, I opened my laptop and pulled up the investment documents I had kept carefully organized over the years. The files laid out everything clearly in legal terms that left no room for doubt. Through the anonymous LLC my lawyer had established early on, I held the majority stake in Connor's company as the principal investor on a convertible note agreement, a common instrument in startup funding that converts debt to equity under specific conditions while including protections for the lender. The note detailed strict requirements for how funds could be used, focusing on business development, marketing, product improvement, and operational needs, rather than personal expenditures. Recent quarterly reports and bank statements attached to the company portal showed patterns of transfers that violated those terms outright. Money routed to non-business accounts for home renovations, vehicle leases, and other lifestyle costs that had no connection to growth targets outlined in the original plan. Those breaches activated clauses allowing me to call the note, immediately demanding full repayment or forcing withdrawal, with penalties that could cripple ongoing operations. It wasn't an emotional decision at that point. The evidence was straightforward, compiled from records the company itself provided to investors as part of transparency obligations. I placed a call to my lawyer, Mr. Harlan Brooks, who had drafted the agreements and managed all related filings from the start. He answered promptly despite the late hour, listening as I walked through the key violations I had flagged and shared the relevant sections via secure link for his review. After examining them carefully, he confirmed the infractions were substantial and triggered my rights without question. The language is clear, he explained calmly, noting that misuse of funds constituted default and gave me authority to enforce repayment terms or terminate further support entirely. We discussed the practical steps, ensuring every action stayed within legal bounds to avoid any counterclaims. Following his guidance, I authorized the formal notice right then, signing the digital documents he prepared and sent over. The process triggered automated systems tied to the investment, Immediate high-priority alerts dispatched through email and text to designated contacts, including Connor as CEO, the company's registered agent, and banking partners handling the accounts. Those messages outlined the demand for repayment and warned of pending restrictions that would lock certain transactions until resolved, with full enforcement set to process the next business morning when financial institutions reopened. My phone began receiving notifications almost right away as the alerts propagated. Connor's messages came in a flurry, starting with confusion and quickly turning sharp. "What the hell is this?" one read, followed by longer texts accusing me of being ungrateful after all the family had been through together, and claiming I was single-handedly ruining everything he had built. He insisted the withdrawals would destroy the company and affect jobs, framing it as a personal attack rather than consequence of his own choices. Nathan sent a couple of brief texts asking if it was true and what I planned to do, but without urgency or any offer to talk it through. His responses felt distant, more like checking a box than genuine concern for the fallout. I read them in silence, feeling the weight of how little he engaged even now. As the messages continued, I started blocking numbers methodically. First Connor's, then others in the family chain, as they began reaching out with questions or pleas. The quiet that followed brought a strange mix of emotions: relief from stepping away from the constant dismissal, and a lingering ache for the connections that had eroded so completely, despite my efforts to sustain them over time. The step marked a definitive shift, closing a chapter I had kept open far longer than it deserved. Within a few weeks, the consequences started rolling in, and they reshaped everything for Connor and Brooke in ways that became impossible to ignore. The sudden loss of major funding created immediate problems for the company, freezing new initiatives and forcing cancellations on commitments that relied on steady cash flow. Several key contracts in negotiation fell apart when partners learned of the financial instability, deciding to take their business elsewhere rather than risk association with uncertainty. The board convened multiple times, reviewing performance reports that highlighted mismanagement issues exposed by the withdrawal, and ultimately voted to remove Connor from his CEO role to protect what remained of the operation and attempt a restructure with new leadership. News traveled fast in the tight-knit business circles around Salt Lake City, where Connor had built his reputation on stories of independent success. The carefully crafted image began to crack as people discussed the abrupt investor pullout and the reasons behind it, with many questioning how a supposedly self-sustained company could falter so dramatically. Brooke posted several updates portraying them as victims of unfair circumstances, emphasizing the hard work that had gone into building everything from scratch. But the responses were largely skeptical. Commenters pointed out gaps in the narrative and expressed doubt about the independence that had been emphasized for so long. The impact extended to their daily lives, where expenses once covered comfortably now forced tough choices. They sold off non-essential assets like an extra vehicle and put renovation plans on hold, while mortgage payments became a growing concern that led to early notices about potential foreclosure if adjustments weren't made quickly. Dad left voicemails expressing anger over what he saw as destruction of Connor's dream and disruption to the family, insisting the decision had gone too far without considering the broader effects. Mom reached out a few times with quieter messages, conveying disappointment and hoping things could be resolved, though she stopped short of pressing for reversal. Nathan sent an email outlining the strain everyone was under and suggesting a conversation to smooth things over, framing it as a way to move past the conflict without assigning blame. I read the communications but chose not to engage, deleting accounts tied to family groups and blocking remaining contacts to create complete separation. The finality brought a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years, allowing space to focus on my own world in Park City. Life there took on new rhythm with regular hiking trails that cleared my mind, ski outings during the winter months that provided physical release, therapy sessions that helped unpack years of built-up resentment, and stronger connections with friends who offered genuine support without conditions. Reflecting on it all, I realized some clear truths. Financial help can ease immediate hardships in family, but it cannot purchase lasting respect or prevent entitlement from taking root. Staying silent in the face of repeated disrespect only prolongs the hurt, and protecting your peace sometimes means walking away from relationships that drain more than they give. Self-respect grows from recognizing when to set firm boundaries, even with blood or marriage ties that feel permanent. To everyone who has followed this story to the end, thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening and staying with me through it all. Your time means a lot, and if any part resonated or sparked thoughts about your own experiences, I'd genuinely love to hear them in the comments below.